Call the meeting to order for the legislative session of Wicomico County Council, session 2022-08 for April 26, 2022. Those that would like to stand and join us in the Lord's Prayer and Pledge of Allegiance, please do.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. And give this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Andrew?
Mrs. Hurley, if Mr. Mitchell is not here,
This okay?
I can certainly read
Yeah.
the
If you don't mind.
introduction if you would like.
thank you very much.
The first item on the agenda is the public hearing on legislative bill 2022-04. It's an act to establish Chapter 46 Law Enforcement Review Board of the Wicomico County Code. And we have Mr. Andrew Illuminati here with the County Attorney's Office if there are any questions.
Thank you. This time we open the floor for a public hearing on legislative bill number 2022-04. If you have any comments you'd like to make in reference to this bill, come to the podium, please. State your name, your county of residence, and your concern. Thank you.
Speak now.
For police accountability?
Yes.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Julie Giordano, Wicomico County. The Police Accountability Bill is a piece of legislation designed to completely break the judicial system and the Free Society of Americans, and in this case, Marylanders. When this type of legislation is enacted against law enforcement, ultimately the citizens are the victims. They are the victims of the crimes committed against them, the victims in the courthouse with no justice, and now victims in a society where their freedoms and way of life are being taken away from those people involved in the criminal activities. Isn't it strange that the rights and due process is being taken away from our officers and law-abiding citizens, and more rights are continually given to the criminals? Crime appears to be at an all-time high. Baltimore just had its 100th homicide for 2022. So why don't we aggressively attack the punishment of convicted criminals? Why are we attacking the people that keep this place from being the wild, wild west? How many more second chances are convicted criminals going to get? Based on this bill, our police may not be willing to perform particular duties in fear of lawsuits and criminal charges. And you know what? I wouldn't blame them. For example, part of this new legislation that's going to be taking place in July is the idea of proportional force. So here's an example. If law enforcement responds to a call for a trespassing complaint and the trespasser is agitated by police presence, the author of this legislation wants police to back out and leave because trespassing is a misdemeanor. And I think the maximum penalty for that is 90 days in jail. Since it is a minor crime, and if the suspect were to resist law and order and something bad could potentially happen, they are saying enforcement of the crime is not worth it. I sure hope none of you need the police when unwanted people are on your property. The Citizen Review Board does not sit well with many because average people are not trained in constitutional law, Maryland law, or the policies of the department. People tend to base decisions on perception and not reality, meaning what they think the law should be and not what it really is. When it comes to police reform, many things do need to change, but this isn't the change. This is an attempt by people against law and order to have a lawless society at the expense of everybody's freedoms, starting with the persecution of our police that keep us safe at night, keep our roads safe to travel, and even keep our kids safe at school. Without them being able to properly protect our way of life, what will our society look like? When decisions are made for this board and when people are appointed, I truly hope those involved in those decisions remember law enforcement has a job to do, a thankless job to protect our citizens, and here in Wicomico County, they do an amazing job.
Thank you.
Good evening, honorable members of the Wicomico County Council, Jared Shabline, Pittsville resident, and representative of the American Civil Liberties Union here on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. I want to start by just briefly thanking every member of the County Council for this work on this legislation. I know this has not been an easy process for anyone. I know the state has kind of dropped this on you with not exactly the clearest of instructions and best timelines. So I want to thank you all for your work on this, for working with members of the community. I'll be very brief. I know you've heard from us enough. I just want to dispel some of the myths here at the ACLU and the many coalition members that we work with here in the county. We don't hate police. We're not out to get police. One of the first trainings I did with the ACLU is study of the Constitution, both here in the state of Maryland and nationally. We're not trying to, start any mobs to go after law enforcement. We're not trying to get any lawlessness. What we're trying to do is implement a bill that allows the community transparency and holds members accountable. One story that I also like to bring up is, does folks remember when police body cams were first implemented? There was major pushback against police body cams. They said the same things. Everything would be lawlessness. It's to crucify police, all these crazy things. What we found with that program is most of the time police body cams find that the police officer did, in fact, act appropriately and do the correct thing. This is very similar to what this board will be. If someone wants to, as Ms. Giuliano said, want to complain about a police officer who called them for trespassing, that case would very easily be dismissed. So I asked the council to disregard the fear-mongering and pass a strong bill. One thing I've heard around the state is Wicomico County has an opportunity to be a leader in the state. That is on this particular issue. That is the first time in my entire life I've heard people around the state come to me and say Wicomico County has a chance to be the leader. So I hope you all take in consideration our amendments, and I hope you all pass a strong PAB. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Honorable County Council. My name is Mary Ashanti, and I live in Wicomico County. I support everything that Mrs. Shablin said. I'm one of the people that signed the letter that was sent to you in reference to the Police Accountability Board. Some of you know me and some of you don't. I support law enforcement officers. I support financing them in the training that they need and the equipment that they need and those kinds of things. I've always done that. I don't think this legislative bill 2022-4 will cause any harm to law enforcement. I think that it will address what has been needed for several years, not only in Wicomico County, but throughout Maryland and really throughout the country. I hope that you remember all the other things that we have said, the letters that we've sent, and that you do pass this bill, and I hope that you do work to be the role model in this situation. Passing this bill will not prevent the sheriff or the chief of police from addressing or supervising what happens in your department. It will not take that right from them, and nor would I support anything that would weaken the authority to do that. But over the years, we watched throughout this country where law enforcement did not have oversight overstepped their bounds, and folks died because of that, and no one went to jail. We want to respect not only citizens' right, but also law enforcement. We want to see at the end of the day, with any law enforcement encounter, that everyone goes home safely. That means the citizen and law enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Shawnee.
Good evening, folks. Robert Taylor speaking. I'm still a resident of Wicomico County, still a taxpayer, and still in good standing on both scores as far as I know. I'm here to address the bill tonight, not the state legislation that requires a bill or a measure by the council, which could be a resolution, to conform to the state law. You can whine or argue or rant all you want about the state law, but the state law is what it is, and that's controlling. However, the bill is not, in the sense that the council or a resolution, a bill, the council has leeway, some latitude in that regard. However, the latitude is very limited. Let me say this before I get into the weeds on that. About 50 years ago, I passed the Maryland bar exam, and for most of that time, I think 49 and a half years, I've practiced law. The last 7 or so years, it's been very part-time, no longer full-time. But during probably 25 or 30 years of that period, most recently, I've spent a lot of time dealing with county and city legislation and procedures. I think I know something about it. And I think I know something about the Maryland law of preemption that applies to local governments. And that is that when you have a state regulation that applies statewide, not to a particular jurisdiction, but to all jurisdictions, then that law, if it is very comprehensive, which the Police Accountability Act of 2021 is, preempts local legislation that would either conflict with it or, under the general preemption doctrine, any regulation at all, unless that regulation locally is specifically allowed by the state legislation. In the 2021 bill, there are a couple of provisions that do authorize the county to do certain things, one of which is to establish the Police Accountability Board and to do some other things with respect to that board, the membership of it. There's another provision that, with regard to these trial boards, the county executive gets to appoint one of the 3 members. The other 2 members are appointed by other bodies. That's about it. The state law also confers the power to adopt regulations with regard to the state law on the State Police Training and Standards Commission. When you put all this together, it's pretty obvious that the state law preempts the county and this council from doing almost anything other than what those several provisions that I've just mentioned allow you to do. That's what we're stuck with, like it or not. And I think within the 25 or so years that I've been looking a lot at local legislation, I got to tell you, I think this bill, it's certainly in the top 10 of the worst I've seen. And probably if I went back and looked over 25 or 30 years of stuff, most of which is in the circular file, it would probably be in the top 2 or 3. I've suggested to you that what this council should do is ditch this bill and proceed by resolution. That will allow you to escape this 60-day time period that we have with bills before they become effective. Resolutions become effective essentially when they're passed. That's what Caroline County is doing. I listened to their work session today on their proposed resolution, which I think I don't know if I've sent it to everyone, but I certainly can, and would be a good prototype to use. It's well-drafted. They haven't passed it finally. They're going to have another meeting in May, possibly more than one. But that will allow them to conform to the July 1 time period, just like it would allow this county to do that. So what I would suggest to do is ditch this bill, and frankly, the executive branch has had their shot at this. I think that the resolution should be drafted by the council's attorney. That's why you have an attorney, to handle things like that. I'll be glad to offer my services for free. I know the old adage, you get what you pay for. But I think, as I say, I think I have some familiarity with how things work in this regard. So I'll cut this short, and I'll just say one thing, 3 little words to end: kill the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Any other comments? Seeing none, that concludes public comments. Entertain a motion from council to approve legislative bill number 2022-04. Need a motion?
So moved.
Second. Need a motion, a second, or legislative bill 2022-04 dies.
Are we going to amend it?
We need to bring it to the table.
Okay, yeah, I'll second.
Okay, motion is second. Thank you. Discussion. Mr. Gentleman, if you could announce to the public who you are and your positions, appreciate it.
Paul Wilbur, County Attorney.
Andrew Illuminati, County Attorney's Office.
Where would you like to start, Mr. Illuminati?
In the last week, there have been some new developments, specifically the governor signed Senate Bill 763 that added a couple more requirements to the process of the trial board end. I've submitted those to council. From the meeting from last week, took the suggestions regarding potential amendments and that were submitted by the public, suggested by members of council, and have incorporated those and distributed them based on your requests. So the bill is in its final form. The governor, nothing passed since the end of the last legislative session extending for Wicomico County when this would all become effective. So it is going to be effective on July 1st, and that's where it is.
Okay. Any questions here to get started?
I mean, it just sounds like to me we're going to need to walk through this page here.
Talking about what they prepared for us as far as the amendments the council had asked?
Right.
Yeah, we certainly are going to do that, right? Yes.
I don't know, that right out the gates, but obviously we got to, and I guess, just to get through it, to Mr. Taylor's comment about, resolution versus legislative bill, is there any appetite for that at all?
Good.
I guess that would, Mr. Wilbur, Mr. Illuminati, is there any merit to that? Would it make it easier for us to deal with this in the future by doing a resolution rather than a bill?
Resolutions always are easier to amend. One reading, lack of as much public hearing. I think in this particular bill, it's been good to have a lot of public hearings so that you've heard from all the different sides that are considering it. So that weighs in on the side of let's do this as a bill and let's amend it in the future, which I'm sure it will be as a bill.
But which is easier to amend? Now, we heard at our last meeting, somebody on the council said that we're sure we're going to be amending this in the future. So which would be
I think so.
better? Which would be more advantageous to the council as far as which way to go here, a resolution or a bill?
Well, a resolution can be passed on one reading, and any comment is at essentially that reading, where a bill has a first reading, public comment, second reading, and there can be even more public comment if the council so chooses. So,
We have to go through the motions of doing a bill every time we amend this.
correct.
And I asked the same questions as well, Joe, and I think the difference being is that if it's in a legislative bill and we have to amend the legislative bill, if I'm not mistaken, it has to go through public hearing process again. And I think in order to assure that this is being as transparent as possible, if we kept it in the legislative bill, you'd have to have the public hearings before we made the amendments. I get what you're saying 100%, because I asked the same questions on the resolution.
I understand. You know, I'll also repeat what I've heard from numerous people. This is a bad bill. No reflection on you guys. Okay, I know you've been.
We understand.
You've been
State
doing
law.
what you can do with what you had handed to you, and I guess
Right.
the council is too. It's gonna really create a lot of problems in our law enforcement community in the future, unfortunately. So.
Yeah, I think I have to agree with Mr. Holloway. I don't think passing a resolution would be that much of a problem. I think we'd still be transparent.
I didn't say that.
I'm saying I kind of agree with what you're saying about the resolution.
I didn't say we needed to.
That's a kind of agree.
Yeah, just to be clear, of course,
So I don't think it's a bad idea either.
this is state law, though we're not our bill, that we're not putting together our own. You know, we're trying to put our own version of what the state has told us that we have to do. So that's how we're addressing it.
Okay. And we also looked at maybe making it emergency legislation so that we can move this process forward a little quicker. But it does not really.
The shoe does not quite fit.
Yes, yes. So that's not going to happen either. So I think we'll try to move forward with what we have on the table. And part of the process today is to look at the amendments that Andrew wrote up for us based on what we had, our concerns were at the last session. On the First Amendment, accountability chair qualifications, I believe you state in amendment options, option 1, you put in yellow highlight, shall have relevant experience to the position. Then you say, note, this is state law. Are you saying that this has to be as written now? There's nothing for the council to review in that statement?
So the current subparagraph 10 of paragraph E, eligibility criteria for membership on the Police Accountability Board has it outlines what the definition of, or what the interpretation of relevant experience to the position is. And one of the largest pushbacks from the public and from council was the chair of the Police Accountability Board being when to the extent practicable, being a retired sworn law enforcement officer in good standing with at least 20 years of service and some other qualifications. And Councilmember McCain said, well, the most broad is what the state is, and I read the state law, which is shall have relevant experience to the position. So in that context, then the chair, when nominated by the county executive and confirmed by this body, looking at what qualifies as relevant experience would be an open definition. So this provides the largest range for individuals to serve. Then option 2, Councilmember Hastings expressed a desire to keep the part about the law enforcement, but also add the opportunity that other similarly qualified individuals would be a retired public defender, a retired state's attorney, or a retired judge. And so that's how, option 1 would be just to strike everything in subparagraph 10 and instead insert the words, the chair of the Police Accountability Board shall have relevant experience to the position. And then option 2 would be to keep subparagraph 10 as written, but to make as the first Roman numeral little I, be a retired public defender, state's attorney, retired judge. Or, and then follow with what is currently there and renumber. So those were the biggest from the public, from council, and those are the two amendment options I think best express the goals that were described.
Okay. Yeah, the 20 years I liked in it is the fact that it sort of demonstrated that any individual that has 20 years has experience not only the people in the police force, but in the community, and understood not only the probably what you would say the officer on the street approach, but also the administrative approach. So you have someone that's familiar with administration, someone that's familiar with officers on the street, and is also familiar with operations within the community. I'm afraid to say just shall have relevant experience to the positions could be very vague, and it could leave the door wide open. So I felt that 20 years really held it to a higher standard, a more qualified standard. In reference to option 2, to add a retired public defender, et cetera, state's attorney, or a retired judge, I thought it was important, probably if someone at that level, as far as that position in this board, that it should still be someone in law enforcement, period. I get it that a public defender is within that arena, but it's not the same thing as someone who is in law enforcement. So those are mine. So I would not be in favor of either option 1 or 2.
Yeah, I'll disagree with you on that. For one thing, we're getting way away from the state law, but all those things in the original content and everything in option 2 as well, all would be encompassed in option 1 if we're using that. I mean, it's broad enough to encompass all those things. It gets so specific, the way it's written now, and also, you said you liked the 20 years, but there's two other parts to that subparagraph that gets even more specific. It has to be a head of a law enforcement agency or a command position within a law enforcement agency. Then also shall have academic credentials that include, a degree from college, university, completion of the FBI National Academy. I mean, it goes on and on. It just keeps getting narrower and narrower. So, I mean, that was the whole intent of the state law, was to keep that broad enough to, but all of those, if someone meets those requirements that are already mentioned, they would meet the requirements in option 1 as well.
And I have to agree with that. Whenever I looked at this, when the state law first came out, I looked at it and I immediately thought someone with the clergy. That's someone I would trust and I would go to as being on the board. And so are we going to be able, if we make it so narrow and we can't find that person, then what?
Yeah, I'll add on to that. I think that's one thing that I've heard is that there's a lot of concern that as narrow as it currently is written, and by the way, of course, it just says now shall have relevant experience position. So it was our job, or pardon me, our county attorney's job, to then put color to that, put picture to that. What does that look like? So they've working with the acting county executive to then say what this should actually, more about being a law enforcement officer. I think we're not a huge county, but we're a large county. But the question of how many retired folks, law enforcement others do we have? So I think that's why we put together a kind of a common middle ground that could be helpful with being a retired public defender, retired state's attorney, or a retired judge. At least that's someone who's been within that realm. I think to Councilman Ackley's point, there are plenty of other folks who could be, have relevant experience, or could be the kind of credible people that you might want within that realm. I think this at least makes it narrow, keeps it narrow, but also is broad enough, or that we would still have enough of a pool, enough folks to be able to try to pull from. That could be the kind of right voice that we might want to have in that position.
Maybe I'm misunderstanding something here. I thought that from what was presented here, that if we took option 1, it shall have relevant experience to the position, period. We're not talking about section 10I or number 1, 2, or 3. We're talking about section 10. So, or is this referring to section 10I?
So option 1 will replace
10I?
A 10I, little I, little I, and little I, little I, little I in its entirety, and insert the word have relevant experience to the position. So, for example, if an individual who has never been a police officer, never studied pre-law, never done anything in relation to the law whatsoever, was put in the position of the chair, there's this, you have to have relevant experience. And so if we picked an individual who's never had, if that person was nominated by the county executive, confirmed by the council, there would have to be some showing of what that relevant experience was. If it wasn't, then potentially later, because of the position that this individual serves, there could be a challenge to their qualifications to serve if a law enforcement officer was charged.
Mr. McCain's statement seemed to suggest that he thought that this option I would only replace subparagraph 10I, because he stated there was still number 2 and number 3 that would guarantee the qualifications of the chair.
I didn't say that.
Well, you said there were the 2 subsections below it.
I was referring to your comment. I was saying that you were saying it was replacing I, which is the question you just asked. It replaces the whole subparagraph,
Right, which I think
which is I, 2I, and 3I. It replaces all of it,
right, which creates.
not just I.
Yeah, which again means it gets down to just a vague interpretation completely.
Well, it's
Does
not
everybody
vague.
understand this, that
It's relevant.
that we're talking about replacing subsection 10, 1, 2, and 3?
Yeah.
With shall have relevant experience to the position. To me, that's very vague.
It doesn't say shall have vague experience to the position, shall have relevant experience. It's got to be relevant. So it's got to have,
And who's to determine that?
who's going to make the appointment? The executive's going to make the recommendation to the council, and we make that determination. Is it relevant?
I think the big thing we need to remember here, you're not going to have people lining up wanting this job.
Right.
Exactly.
You need it broad.
You could consider just saying relative experience to the position to include, list these things, or similar experience as may be shown.
I wouldn't have a problem if shall have relevant experience to the position were to replace number 1, and then you left 2 and 3 in there, because there needs to be some structural control over who these people are going to be and who they're going to represent, because it could be a priest the way it is right now. So I think, what would it hurt to replace the one sentence about 20 years of service with shall have relevant position, and then continue on with the other requirements, such as command position within law enforcement, a degree of accredited college, et cetera?
Well, I think it would just be best to, let's make it a little more, I think the intent of the law obviously is that it should be relevant experience. So we're trying to figure out what does that look like. In this case, I think it's great to have that as an option, and I like the depth to which we're trying to make sure that this is someone who has the academic credentials as well as the experience. I think we just, in order to, I think the one thing that I'm hearing is obviously that we may not have a big enough a pool in this case, though. So then if we keep that whole section and then add something to that, what else would that look like? And that's kind of where option 2 comes for, as far as the public defender, retired state's attorney, or retired judge, someone who's been in the mix within that realm, but we're not just opening up to any old individual. And so it'd be those, their judge, their public defender, state's attorney, and the way that it's currently written, which would be the law enforcement officer who has a lot of experience in education. I think option 2 might be better middle ground to narrow it, but without being, option 1, correct me if I'm wrong, just basically sticks in state law, the way that it's written in the state law, which is shall have relevant experience, right?
So it would then read that the chair of the Wicomico County Police Accountability Board shall
be a retired public defender, retired state's attorney, or retired judge.
But
or
we've left out the phrase of shall have relevant experience to the position.
Yeah, we wouldn't have in this case, we wouldn't go with option 1, we'd go with option 2.
What if we combined option 1 and 2? and put, shall have relevant experience to the position
To include,
to include a retired public defender, a retired state's attorney, and then have it as it shows with everything else in there. I think what I'm hearing is that everyone wants to get rid of it looks as if they're trying to get rid of the 20 years of experience. I'm not sure about that.
Let me ask Mr. Illuminati, Mr. Wilbur, what would be most defendable if somebody did end up, going to court, if we followed state law or if the county made their own amendments?
It's a difficult hypothetical. So let's pretend that there's a physician who's nominated, just practitioner of medicine their entire life, never studied anything, but obviously smart individual, passed the medical boards, and they were put in that position. Or you had a road officer who spent 18 years, got medically discharged, so they didn't hit their full retirement, but did nothing but respond to calls or issue citations through the transit authority. On paper, one has a lot more academic credentials than another, but relevant experience to the position, if that physician was placed over top of that officer who served 18 years, I think it would be very difficult to argue that the nomination and the confirmation of that physician had relevant experience to the position.
But I guess that says that why would somebody appoint a physician over a police officer? Yeah.
Don't disagree.
Yeah.
That's
But that would give, this option one would give them the right to do that. Correct. Yeah.
there would have to be a justification of that there is relevant experience to the position in some way, shape, or form. I mean, this is ultimately what we've been talking about for the past 9 months, is this is a poorly written law that the state handed the county and said, go interpret what relevant experience is to the position.
Right.
And this council has worked very diligently, as has the acting county executive, to try to define what that relevant experience is.
Okay, so to stay within state law that says shall have relevant experience to the position, right? Then it would, then let's say that it would say this: the chair of the Wicomico County Police Accountability Board shall have relevant experience to the position, such as being a retired public defender, retired state's attorney, or retired judge, or, as you've written here, or be a retired sworn law enforcement with 20 years of service and the college, et cetera, et cetera. So we're combining the two, but we sort of have an out where the relevant experience could be simply a retired public defender, retired state's attorney, or judge, or looking at the 20-year experience.
And with that, with the clause at the front, to the extent practicable, and then the such as at the end, if you had somebody who didn't meet any of these, because as the discussion has been, it may be a narrow pool of who's applying, but you have that transit authority officer who served 18 years, that would be the best nomination for the position. So I think that does sort of cover it in every possible way while still adhering to state law.
So it's kind of like saying, we'd like to have a 20-year experience, but we'll take someone of relevant experience as well.
Correct.
So we've got the best of both worlds.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No.
I'm okay with that.
So if we just followed the state law and looked at what kind of applicants because we're assuming we're going to get all these applicants, right? That it's going to be retired law enforcement, they may possible judge, we're assuming we're going to get that. If we don't, then do we come back and amend it to make it fit for one of the applicants that have applied?
I don't think that's necessary. I think that's a valid concern, but with the proposal or potential amendment being offered by the president, with the phrase to the extent practicable at the beginning and the such as at the end, when the nominations are put forward and this council meets to approve the nominations, I think that's going to be a point that's going to have to be stated, which says, for the record, this is what our code calls for. We didn't meet that, but this person is the most, to the extent practicable, And these are their qualifications of those who we have received.
So is everybody okay with the combination there? We good with that? Okay.
I like option one.
I'm just confused. Bill?
That's pretty much what I was talking about before, but I think if you did what Andrew was talking about, and at the end say, or similar, because you may not get the retired judge, you may get somebody, you say, this person's been working in law enforcement for a long time, but not in the particular ones listed. So you're giving potential examples, but not tying you to that exact thing. It's the same thing as you said, except you're just adding at the end.
Well, yeah, I don't know whether saying something similar, I'm afraid again, Andy, that saying something similar, like that's, you're an attorney. What does that leave you open to? Interpretation, right?
Yes, it does, but without it, somebody's going to argue it has to be someone in that group.
Well, I would like it
Yeah.
to be. I think we need to be, this is
but
law. It
I
needs to be
think what
specific.
Counselor Ackley said, and it's been said over here too by Counselor Holloway, you may not find those people.
I can't imagine we're not going to, I mean,
You're not even find them, they might not want to do it.
Yeah,
Well, that's what I
I don't
mean.
know if we're gonna find people want to do it.
well, I think we need to take the measures that we think are
Yeah.
best suited to it instead of opening it up to anything and anybody,
I'm not
out
saying they're
there.
gonna take, you gotta take them, but if it came up to the point that nobody in this filled out, then that's when you can say the best relevant person that applied.
Right, I agree. Yeah, it's the best, the good faith effort on our part to apply, to accommodate the state of Maryland, and come to something as close as we possibly can. So, revisiting this one more time, the combination of the two that we have in front of us, I'm trying to avoid getting into the similar category, but it's not my decision.
I'm okay.
So we would be what Mr. Mitchell had just said.
I don't agree with what Mr. Mitchell said.
Okay.
That's why I said I'm just saying, initially, I think we had come to a conclusion that the combination of the relevant experience and the or in there with 20 years of experience was satisfactory. And then we kind of shifted away from that to the similar, and I go down that road. What are we going to do here?
I want to make sure somebody's qualified, but I also want that door open just in case we can't find enough people.
Well, then we would go back to the state and say, hey, we did the best thing, we did the very best faith effort possible, and this isn't working right. This isn't
Then at
working.
the same time, you might be holding up a board, there might be something that's on the table, and you're saying we have to go back, we gotta hold this police officer's career at hold, because we gotta go back to the state because we didn't do what we should have done from the start to get somebody in that position. So you're saying we're gonna hold this officer livelihood at bay to go back to the state and say we didn't do what we were supposed to do, what should we do?
No, this is a matter of establishing the board, period.
Yeah.
Day one. I just think it's really, I think you're getting into some really vague territory to use the term or something similar. That opens you up to anybody. A council member should say, I'm a county council member, that's similar. And then we're on a police accountability board. No law enforcement experience. I just like to keep it, it's supposed to be the law, and I like you to get it as close to the law as possible.
But that can happen regardless, even the way it's written, because it says to the extent practical. And if it's not, if you don't find somebody who meets those qualifications, they can still serve.
And I think that's as far as we have to go, to say to the extent applicable, or whatever you said. Practical gets us very, very close. To then switch and say also whatever similar, all of a sudden you're spinning down another road.
Yeah, I'm not going for the similar part.
Yes.
Mr. President, would you like me to put on the screen what you sort of discussed so everyone can sort of see it written down? Okay. Ms. Hurley, I don't know how to get out of where we are.
Does the council have an appetite to put in the phrase at the end of this amendment to say, or something similar? That's the question.
I'm fine with that.
Excuse me?
I'm fine with that.
I'd rather not. I'd rather keep it, let's keep it narrow, and then if we don't get enough applicants, we can come back to this and I'd rather have the process that I'd rather be more clear. We're basically saying that this isn't, we want these types of individuals as our lead people, and if we don't get that, something similar. And then if we need to come back to that,
Bill?
Josh, that's,
I'm kind of waiting to see what Mr. Illuminati is going to put up here.
Okay.
There goes that 2 hours. There goes that 2 hours.
Exactly. We read this close.
Josh, the problem with coming back is, like Ernie said, you could have a police officer that's either on paid or unpaid leave. That's, his career's being held up, he's in limbo, short a police officer. And while the council's sitting trying to figure out what to do in the next step, and you can see how it's working tonight. It's not, so.
Well,
and this is just for part 10, right, with the chair, right?
And Andrew, why do you put that in the beginning, the such as opposed at the end?
So this is where would,
Why wouldn't you just say such as a retired sworn, kind of leave the order like it was, and maybe put the retired public defender or state's attorney, retired judge at the end? It's like a 4.
when I tried doing that, when I drafted these amendments, when I read the first subparagraph and put "or" at the end, it didn't read properly in the way that I read it. It seemed more confusing than to put that at the beginning and then put "or" and then just renumber. But whatever you believe is, however you'd like it to read.
We can certainly address that, but that's some of semantics. I'd rather get to the heart of what we're trying to
Want to
do.
vote on it, you got to have the language right. Or you could just include all that in your one. You're listing,
Because it breaks out, when it goes into law enforcement officer, then it has all of the sub pieces that go along with that. What does that look like?
you had a semicolon at the end, and then and or
So we're saying that.
retired public defender or state's attorney or retired judge. Cut and paste.
So if it was to be moved
Yeah.
to the end,
Or what if you just moved it right after your and?
Just take the such as and put it down where the end is.
Yeah, where your and was
Cut and paste it
in
down.
part one.
sorry,
Wordsmithing with counsel is never a good idea.
no.
Yeah, I know. You had your and there, now it's,
See where you have end as the last section on page 10. Just cutting and pasting that. Or are you saying that the state law, no, it doesn't say that.
So remove that and stick it at the end. Remove that section.
Take such as and put it right after the word end.
right there. in part.
Capital, in all capitals.
Yeah. exactly.
Right there.
Right there,
Yeah.
yep.
With that? With the be retired there? Or insert the such as and then provide that additional in both sections? So it could be,
And I don't think you need to say such as, just and or a retired public defender, or retired state attorney, or retired judge. Get rid of your such as, there you go.
All right, so what we have right now is the chair of the Police Accountability Board shall have relevant experience to the position, such as a retired sworn law enforcement officer who retired in good standing with at least 20 years of service. It's on the impression that the amended section you were looking at would put the retired public defender, retired state's attorney, and retired judge as the first section, and then we would say, or.
that's what I had, and I was asked to move it. I can put it back to
Yeah, I would say, if you don't mind, I would just put it back where it was. I think the continuity was, would be, yeah.
And I think it flows better this way because then the or applies to the law enforcement, and then only those credentials, such as be a head of a law enforcement agency and have the academic credentials, only relates to the officer, because any of the other three individuals already have the accreditation through having their Juris Doctorate.
Okay.
So I think having it read this way allows for the broadest possibility of individuals to serve, so that even if there was not anyone who met any of these qualifications, then that would be the rationale when confirming whoever is being confirmed as the chair, that no one who applied, but of all the people who applied, this person's the most qualified. So that would be, because you have your, to the extent practicable, and then you list what potentially constitutes relevant experience, such as being one of those three lawyers or being law enforcement for a certain number of years. And if so, somebody who only had 18 years and nobody else applied, that would be your most qualified individual.
As it's written.
That was my purpose in saying, or similar experience, because if you get to the end and they don't meet any of those criteria, but they were 19 years and decide to go in, into some other business or whatever, that they may be the best qualified person and real close, but they don't make it.
As soon as you say or similar experience, you might as well just get rid of section 2, 3, and 4, because that's not even relevant anymore. Because you're just looking for someone who
I don't
is.
want to argue with, yeah, it would be, because that's what it's similar to, what you listed.
Where's the recommendation for placing or something similar? Where would that be placed?
At the end of the list. I wouldn't say something, I'd say similar experience.
We do realize, we did a work session on this, and we said that we wanted to stay as close to the state law as we could, and kind of agreed to that in our work session. That's why option 1 and 2 was presented. And as John said in the beginning, there was angst over the 20 years and so forth, and we've literally done just the opposite that we said we were going to do the last work session, but.
What we have here is what Andrew took from the last work session.
That's what I'm saying. And that's why we have those two amendment options. We told him we wanted to amend the subparagraph. Now we've left it in and added to it.
I'm okay with it as presented right now. I think if we were Caroline County, or if we had smaller population, that might be a bigger issue. Really feeling like we may not have somebody in there who could meet that experience, but I think we've got enough folks who live in the county or have enough experience, and this gives enough options. Law enforcement officers, very well experienced, as well as someone who's worked in the criminal justice system for a while, that has a JD.
All right, we're getting hung up on one word, and that's something similar to being added into what we had put up here in front of us. Bill, where were you on that?
I'm indifferent to that. Adding that, there's no harm, no foul.
Ernie?
I don't see no problem with it.
Excuse me?
I don't see no problem.
Joe? Larry?
I like the combination to make sure that we have the qualified people, and then, like I said, leave the door open just in case you have that 18 or 19-year applicant.
I put the phrase "or similar to" there, and there's somewhere.
Similar experience.
We'll go on. Right, thank you. Amendment 2, the section that was in here in reference to an active shooter simulator. As you can read, it says members must successfully complete required training before serving on a Wicomico County Police Accountability Board. Required training shall be set by the county executive in consultation with Eastern Shore Criminal Justice Academy, et cetera. And then it says training shall include the option of participating in an active shooter simulator.
Mr. President,
Yes.
before you proceed to Amendment 2, did you want to do a formal vote on Amendment 1? Or what were your thoughts on that?
I think I'd rather give them time to just get the terminology on the ending that one sentence on that one amendment.
So this is how it's up there. So in what would become the new subparagraph 2, it would say, or similar experience. So if it wasn't 20 years, it was 18 years, that would be or similar experience. And then at the end of what's the new subparagraph 3B, as far as the educational requirement, it has or similar experience.
Yeah, whatever happens in a court of law, if let's say a police officer is found responsible and et cetera, goes through the whole process, and then an attorney comes back and wants to question the integrity of the board or the charging committee and says, what does this word similar experience mean? What are you telling us? This person has similar experience? Don't you think that's going to open up a can of worms in a court of law?
It's a lot smaller opening than if you put relevant experience. So that's what the state law would, with no guidance whatsoever. would
I
say.
can't help state law. I'm talking about what we have the ability to put in today.
I understand that, but you have to, what this is doing is defining what you think relative experience is and saying, to the extent practical, that's at the beginning, you'll follow this relative experience, but, this relevant experience, but if you don't find somebody, you're going to look to somebody whose credentials are similar to these that you've listed. I have a son that's been a public defender and is now a prosecutor, but he hasn't been there 18 years.
So you're going to tell him to apply?
Well, he's in Virginia, but.
So what is capitalized and underlined is, I believe, what the current proposal is, and the similar experience can be added or deleted.
All right, we're voting on the added. That's what we're voting on. So,
Okay.
yes, so as it is there. All those in favor say aye.
Voting on the, as
Voting
written.
on the amendment as written, which says, or similar experience.
We have a motion for that amendment?
Well, the motion would be as, I don't want to read the whole thing, so I'm entertaining a motion, yes, to make the amendment as stated. So we need a motion and a second and a vote. Is there a motion?
I don't like the or similar as, but I'll make the motion.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, so I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, unless there's further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Oh, the chair says nay, so I'm assuming it's going to be, I haven't heard all, Larry, let's take a
I
count.
said aye.
Aye. Joe? Ernie?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Josh?
I'll go with the nay.
There's a nay. And
You made a motion and voted nay.
there's 2 nays. He can do that. He can do that.
I know that.
We have 5 ayes and 2 nays. Thank you. Amendment number 2 references the active shooter simulator. It's been put in here in capitals, consultation with Eastern Shore Criminal Justice Academy based on standards. And training shall include the option of participating in an active shooter simulator. In an active shooter. I first of all, don't like the word, the option. I think they should have to participate in it.
I guess one question I have about
Yes,
that.
sure.
Depending on how far they get into this training, are they even allowed to do the active shooter simulator?
Let me do one thing first, Joe. Entertain a motion to approve amendment number 2 for discussion.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, good. All right, go ahead. Joe.
That's a question. Would they even be allowed to take active shooter? Has anybody checked with Warwick to see if that's allowable?
The private companies that do the active shooter training.
So anybody can do active shooter simulators?
No, not anybody can do it, but the trainings are with private companies.
No, I know,
Any
but
citizen-
anybody can take the training.
Yes, any
Is that
citizen
correct?
can take shooter simulation, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
but-
They can go
Okay.
for it.
But remember, they got to do what's before that. They got to complete the Police Training and Standards Commission required training
Okay.
before they serve. So, this would just,
Just didn't want us to make an amendment for something that can't be done.
Right.
so having,
Yeah.
that's why I think it's good to make it an option, because that's even another layer.
Well, if it's an option, it's not a law, it's not a rule, it's not a law.
Right.
The option just says, hey, you feel like doing it? No, okay, fine.
That's fine.
That's not a law.
Then that's
Talking about
fine.
law here, gentlemen.
I guess one point that council brought up last time about putting the option language in there was if somebody who's 75, 80 years old sitting on the board
Right.
and they're not physically, then we have to put in, exemptions for physical capabilities, or if a handicapped individual was on the board and they couldn't participate, then the option part's not put in there. I think, as has been said many times, this is the option, and then if a year from now, every member of the board is declined to do it, then the council can come back and say, we think this is really important that you do this, strike the language option from it. Or, ask as part of a application, will you be willing to participate in an active shooter simulator? Because you're going to be asking that of all three boards, and anybody who says no, that could be something, or notes of physical impairment that would prohibit it. That's something that can be, not to exclude those people, but to understand why they may elect not to participate.
Well, the reason it was proposed initially was that the individual that recommended it from the public said anyone that's serving on these boards should really understand to the fullest degree the responsibilities of anyone who's being accused of this, and just what split-second decisions do have to be made. They had to be able to empathize with that. And that's why it was suggested, and why I proposed that it be part of a requirement that those individuals go through shooter simulation. They're 80, and they can't do a simulator. They could go to a simulator. It doesn't mean they have to pass. It just means they have to take it, so they experience what is happening. So I think that's what the purpose of this is. It's not an
And
option.
then we discussed it and said we thought it should be an option.
I don't remember that. I'd have to go back.
Isn't that why you have, that was part of the reason you have this in here?
My notes indicated to consider it as an option.
Right.
It's easier to put option in and then strike that from the potential amendment. So I made it broad, and if you don't like the option, then that's very simple to strike from when you make the amendment without the option portion.
Do we need to define active shooter? Like when I think of active shooter, I think of like a school shooting or something like that, or other kind of, but I'm not in that field. So is that a common terms that everyone's, any kind of situation where someone's got a gun and that is an active shooter, I'm assuming, but.
There is I think for purposes of this it's understood what it means. Active shooter is something, but technically, like FBI defines an active shooter with a specific definition of somebody in a position inflicting mass casualties. So that shooting in Las Vegas would be an active shooter situation, whereas an officer making a traffic stop and the suspect gets out of a car and is using the car as a shield and starts shooting at the officer, that would be a less active shooter, but for these narrow purposes, it would still be an active shooter.
Okay. Sheriff Lewis, just as a point of clarification, this terminology is sufficient.
It is, but instead of active shooter, I would call it shoot, don't shoot.
Yeah, because when you get on that simulator, that's what it really is.
All right.
It determines whether you're going to shoot somebody or
Thank you.
not to shoot
All
somebody.
right, so we would, is that okay with everyone? We'll change that to shoot.
Well, I think we
don't
need to
shoot
take the option
simulator.
out of it. I think they need to either do it or don't do it.
Okay, one at a time. Okay, one at a time. We're okay to change the terminology to shoot or don't shoot.
Okay.
Okay.
But if someone has a disability,
Everybody in okay
And then
agreement with shoot or don't shoot?
yeah, to change that.
We've got
yeah.
the definition of the term. Thank you. Okay, Joe. Joe.
Well, I think, like somebody said, was it you or somebody said, if it's an option, it doesn't make it a law.
Yeah.
It needs to either be in there or not in there. I
Right.
mean, we either do it or we don't do it. I mean, there's nothing, we've not said anything else in here that says, we have an option to be a retired public defender or an option to be this or that. I mean, this is, that just kind of leaves the door open to not even do it,
The Nicole?
I would just have a concern that someone with a disability, whether it's a retired police officer that, or whatever it may be that has a disability that can't complete that training.
If you're gonna-
It's not state law.
Mike, I'll have to defer to you. If you don't mind coming to that podium, because I just,
If you're gonna
you
make-
come, you can sit here if you want to, but it's,
The thing of it is, if you're gonna make it, you want somebody to know something about police work.
someone who's
This is about gonna be the closest thing you're gonna get them to do it, because unless you send them through the police academy for 6 months, this is gonna be the closest thing you can get somebody trained in a quick time. That simulator is gonna do it. If you want them to know everything about law enforcement, you're gonna have to send them to the academy. So if you don't put something in there in concrete to say this is what you must do to understand, like you said, they're gonna say, well, I don't want to do it. And then, you're giving them the option, which is not right. We should tell them what they're gonna have to do if they're gonna be on this board.
Do they have is there a citizens, is there some type of like citizens police training that we have, or?
Again, that's
in reference to the
weeks of
simulator, if
training.
we could, Mr. Mike, I'm sorry, Sheriff, would someone who is disabled, would they have the ability to participate in the simulator, and do you think they could
They would.
benefit? And could they
And there
benefit?
are private entities right here within Wicomico County that offer those services to anyone. As Madam Councilwoman said a while ago, anybody can attend this training, but it is an invaluable piece that I think should be in addition to this. It's an invaluable training piece that I think everyone should experience so they can understand all the stressors that are involved in a shoot, don't shoot situation.
Current concerns over age 80 or concerns over disability, would those individuals still be able to take part in this simulator and benefit from it?
Yes, they could.
Okay, all right. thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, everyone's forgetting, though, the first line here, this section. And and someone can answer what's involved in that. The first line is members must successfully complete the Police Training and Standards Commission required training before serving on the Wicomico County Administrative Charging Committee. So what does that involve? How extensive is the Police Training and Standard Commission required training?
Is that the state law? That come from the state?
Yes.
Yeah, so looking at the Police Accountability Board, looking at paragraph E, subparagraph 4 on the screen, that's number 4, what's in capital is sort of what's being proposed right now. So the state law does not require training to serve on the Police Accountability Board at this point in time. So the council, the acting county executive is asking that there be some training to sit on the Police Accountability Board, because that board is nominating individuals to sit on the charging committee, sit on the trial board, and having these quarterly meetings with law enforcement to discuss policing matters. So some training is required. Last time council expressed that in consultation with the Eastern Shore Criminal Justice Academy, based on standards for proper policing, including use of force training, including use of force. And then that was Councilmember Dodd. Then the president asked for training shall include participating in what is now written as a shoot, don't shoot simulator. So successfully can be struck. Complete required training, that would just basically mean show up on the day of. I think the envision is that it's going to be looking at what the state does to sit on the charging committee and making it a generic 4 to 6 hour event. All that the accountability board is doing, besides appointing to other boards, is having quarterly meetings with law enforcement to discuss policing. So this is not determining whether or not an officer should be charged administratively or not. So this requires a lesser training, or if the council feels a more severe training, a more labor-intensive training, that can be added as well.
So, let's try to wrap this up. We're going to be here all night.
What does the green highlight mean on our copy?
That's a proposal for the COMAR, so for the state regulations. So the training commission, the police training commission's recommending that to be part of the code regulations. It's going through that review process.
So they're recommending that they take this simulator training?
No, we're only we're only discussing this highlight in gray right now.
Right, and that's highlighted green on my copy.
All right.
That's what it says right there. He copied all of it.
So, the one small point is, and Joe, you had touched on it, the terminology of option or no option. So we're going to have to decide right now, first of all, whether or not we're going to keep the terminology of option or no option in, first of all, and then we'll decide on whether or not we want to vote on the whole idea of simulator. Larry?
Keep it in.
Joe?
Take the option.
Excuse me?
Like I said before, if you leave the option in, it's not part of the law. I mean, it just makes it an open-ended, so.
Okay. Ernie?
Take it out.
Bill?
Take it out.
Josh?
I think it should read shall provide the opportunity to participate in a shoot, don't shoot simulator, as opposed to.
Okay, you're saying leave it in. Nicole?
When he
Take it out.
changed the wording, he said.
I don't want to change the word.
Yeah.
I don't want to change the word. You're not allowed to change the word.
He changed the word.
It's
I
not
think my
on the
wording's
floor.
better, but it's okay. Okay.
Option or no options?
I'll keep the option.
Okay.
If I think mine better, but if otherwise, I'll just keep the option.
Nicole?
Take it out.
Okay, the chair says take it out. So we'll take out the option. Now, I'll consider that a friendly amendment. I don't want to get into anything else besides that. Now we would vote on whether or not to include this entire section, which would amend the document by requiring that they take a shooter simulator course. All those in favor, Larry?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Ernie?
You said you took the option out.
We did take the option out.
Okay.
It's out.
Done.
No, we just took the word option out. Now we're voting on the amendment as a whole. It's a
So
simulator.
what's in capitals is what?
We're voting,
I thought, I'm totally confused. I thought we were taking out, we were taking the option. I thought we're taking that out.
we took the word,
line
we took
out.
out the word option.
Well,
We were removing the word
let's do that again,
option.
because I thought you were taking back, when you said take the option out, I thought you meant take take this out as an option.
All right, so again, we're just looking at taking the terminology, the option, out of this amendment, okay? Everybody clear?
The one word.
The one word. Nicole?
Removing what's struck here, the option of.
Just taking option out of all the context that's in here, the word option. Nicole, yes or no?
Yeah.
Yes takes it out. Okay, yes. Josh?
Keep it in.
Keep it in. Okay, that's a no. Bill?
Keep it in.
Larry?
Take it out.
Joe?
Take it out.
Ernie?
Take it out.
Chair says take it out. Okay, we have a 5-2 vote to take out option. Now we've got to figure out how we're going to pass the amendment. Okay, the amendment now will read, without the word option, it will require participating in an active shooter simulator. Everybody clear? All those in favor of this amendment number 2, say aye. We'll start with Larry. Yes, yes.
I thought the sheriff suggested changing it to,
Yeah, with the recommendation that the sheriff, yes, correct.
you just said active shooter simulator.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm
That shoot, no.
trying to get this thing out.
Mr. Chair, you want what's on the board to be the amendment?
Okay, thank you, Joe.
Okay.
As Sheriff Lewis
Keep you
designated.
straight.
Thank you. Larry?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Ernie?
Yes.
Nicole?
Yes.
Josh?
Nay.
Bill?
Nay.
Chair votes aye, 5-2 in favor of amendment number 2. Thank you. Anything else that we're now on amendment number 3, the eligibility criteria? Any discussion on amendment number 3? Would you like to tell us, Mr. Ruminati, where we are with it?
Before we go on, just for number 2, that's for all 3 boards, correct?
Yes.
Okay, clearing. Is that clear, Ms. Hurley? Okay, thank you. All
Amendment 3.
right, the eligibility criteria, this was another one that was, this is only for Police Accountability Board. So the council asked for 3 different versions. The first version that was one where if you've gone 7 years without getting in trouble with a crime of moral turpitude, you can serve on the board. Crime of moral turpitude includes thefts, but it does not include people who commit sort of assault in the second degree or neglect a child. Those are misdemeanors. Option 2 is raise the term there was concern about imprisonment for a 1-year requirement, raise that up to 2 years. By raising the requirement that your misdemeanor conviction be for imprisonment for 2 years or more, that is actually the requirement to own a firearm in Maryland. So that would, basically, if you can own a firearm in Maryland, you could be eligible to serve on the board. And then the most, would allow the most people eligible to serve would be option 3, which is if after 5 years, whether it's a felony, misdemeanor, probation before judgment, or pretty much anything, then you can serve on the board. So option 1, if you've been if you received a probation before judgment or were convicted of a felony, you can't serve. Or if you've been convicted of or received a probation before judgment for a misdemeanor, which is also a crime of moral turpitude, in the past 7 years. So, the cleanest is if you can own a firearm, you can lawfully serve on this board, which is option 2. But I think that takes any clear. There's a number of statutes that require. So somebody who has a DUI could actually still serve if you raise it to 2 years because they can lawfully own a firearm in Maryland.
Excuse me, Mr. President. I had a prior appointment before we scheduled this. I'm going to have to step out.
All right, thank you.
So, I apologize, we're looking right here, and this highlight gray is where the amendment would be. So it could say, instead of 1 year, it could say 2 years. It can say at the beginning as a qualifier in the past 5 years. And then once you have reached 5 years past your point, you could serve. Or it can be more convoluted with the 7 years in a moral turpitude crime.
We spent the first hour of this meeting, and you spent countless hours trying to put together a bill here, or rework a bill, or however you want to call it, to try to get people with good moral turpitude, is that the word you use? Values or whatever, people that have been upstanding citizens. I wouldn't think we would want to dilute it now by putting somebody on there that's a convicted felon. So that might not make some people happy, what I just said, but anyway, sometimes things you do come back to haunt you your whole life. So anyway.
Okay, first of all, I would, I guess, need an amendment from any council member to amend the Legislative Bill 2022-04 with Amendment 3 and state whether there's option 1, 2, or 3 that you would like to make that amendment to. If not, it will stay as is. Need a motion?
I'll make a motion
Which option?
that we move for Amendment 3. Or are you just introducing Amendment 3 or sorry?
No, Amendment 3, but more specifically, there's 3 options, and I'd like
gotcha.
to kind of debate. I'd like to know which option we're debating.
I'll withdraw it. I'd rather just strike misdemeanor or have it, I'd rather read take out the misdemeanor or have it say that it's within the last 5 years. I'm trying to get an understanding if that's, is that Amendment 2?
3.
Or 3?
Amendment 3.
Well, he's asking which option it is.
Oh,
Okay.
option 3 of Amendment 3. Would read, in the past 5 years, has been convicted of or received a probation before judgment for a felony or a misdemeanor for which a 1 year or more sentence of imprisonment for 1 year or more could have been imposed. So I can put that up there. So then once somebody, whether a felony or misdemeanor, has served their 5 years, not 5 years incarceration, just 5 years from the date of conviction, they would be eligible to serve on the committee.
Is that the amendment that you were recommending, Josh?
I think I do not want it to read past 5 years for a felony. I'd rather have it read, if we want to prevent anyone that's had a felony, I think that's fine. Misdemeanor, I feel like we need to limit that a little bit, within the last 5 years as kind of misdemeanor.
All right, then if it's going to be broader than that, just give me an amendment, give me a motion to amend the legislative bill with Amendment 3. Can you do that?
Yeah, I'll make a motion.
There's a motion for Amendment number 3. Second.
Yeah.
Second. Please.
As written by Andrew.
Well, Amendment 3 covers everything here, and we're going to have to get into a broader discussion. I need a second for this Amendment 3 for discussion.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, so Josh, you're not really willing to make an amendment on any one particular option. You sort of want something a little different. Is that right?
I think the way that option 3 was crafted makes sense, but I don't want it to read that in the past. I think we've gotten enough pushback, and there's certainly not the political will to have an individual who has had a felony, to be able to be on this board. So in this case, are we including a misdemeanor? In which case, I think we should, but maybe limit it to within the past 5 years
Okay, so if we assume that we're going to go with option 3, do you want to see that to be 2 years instead of 5?
I think I'd be fine with the past 5 years has.
So option 3 as written?
Past 5 years when convicted. The only so it says for a felony. That's my problem.
Councilmember Hastings, is what's on the
Yeah,
screen?
I think
is
what
that
you've
you're
written
looking
is right.
for?
Received in probation for judgment.
So what's on the screen prohibits any felon, whether they're convicted or probation before judgment, from serving, and it prohibits if you've in the past, and then anyone who has 5 years since their conviction or probation before judgment, they can serve if it has more than 1 year. That's, I believe, what you've articulated, though is not in one of the options that.
From the comments that I've received and from what I hear from talking to other folks, I feel like that's the most acceptable
That's
middle
what you want.
ground.
What's highlighted
Yeah,
in gray?
I'm good with that.
Okay, so there's a motion to amend Legislative Bill 2022-04 as detailed in Amendment 3 and in the gray as Josh has. Is there a second to that? Is there a second to this motion?
Second.
All right, any further discussion on the motion that Josh has on the floor? Is everybody okay with what's been written in gray? Any other questions? All those in favor of this amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
You all right, Joe?
No.
Take your time.
Nay.
Nay. Okay, so we have 5 ayes and 1 nay. Okay, thank you. Let's amend it as such.
How many nays?
It's 4 and 2.
5 and 1. Who else said?
4 and 2.
Excuse me? Who else said nay?
I said nay.
Oh, I didn't hear you. Okay. 4 and 2.
Said it twice.
I might be confused on that. Is that the most lenient one or the most restrictive one we're gonna have?
It's probably the middle ground. No felons, and then 5 years from when you've been convicted or received probation before judgment on a misdemeanor, you can serve. So somebody gets an assault when they're in college, 15, they can't.
I'm okay with it.
Aye. Okay, so we have, let me count, don't get it wrong.
I can't
5 to
hardly-
1.
I can't hardly see it.
That's all right, Joe, we're trying to rush it. It's 5 to 1, okay, for the record. Thank you. Okay, amendment number 4, eligibility criteria for state employees.
Okay, so the concern was it we're just moving down to an active employee of, and it would add the state of Maryland, Wicomico, and then it already leaves all the others. So the thought was if they're already the prohibition would be on those who serve in the county or a municipal corporation, it would add those who are employed by the state of Maryland to the list of those who cannot serve on the Police Accountability Board.
Entertain a motion to approve amendment number 4 as stated.
So moved.
Second. Second. Anybody?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All we're doing is adding the state of Maryland to this. All right, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion's carried, amendment passes. Amendment number 5 under definitions.
Adding the actual state language of what police misconduct is. Police misconduct is a pattern of practice or conduct by a police officer or law enforcement agency that includes 1, depriving persons of rights protected by the Constitution or laws of the state or the United States, 2, a violation of a criminal statute, and 3, a violation of law enforcement agency standards and policies. It's to add that definition, which is state law, and then right in here, we see, the argument was that was a little confusing, calling it county law enforcement agency, so striking the term county, striking from there, and striking the term county from down here. So we're in E and G, and then adding the definition of police misconduct, and adding, which is state law, and then adding terms not specifically defined that are expressly defined in state law. The annotated Code of Maryland Public Safety Article 3101 et sec, and any COMAR regulations promulgated under it shall have the same meaning as given to them by those provisions. So this just clarifies law enforcement agency is a governmental police force, sheriff's office, security force, or law enforcement organization of Wicomico County or a municipal corporation within Wicomico County that by statute, ordinance, or common law is authorized to enforce the general criminal laws of the state. Jumping down to officer, it would strike the term county since the other one's being amended. It would add state law definition of police misconduct, which has been read, and add an I, which would provide for the provisions of state law and their definitions.
Okay, entertain a motion to approve amendment number 5.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion?
That's all we're doing is just adding the definition.
Cleaning up some definitions, correct?
Sure.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Amendment number 5 passes. Amendment number 6, entertain a motion to approve amendment number 6. Please.
So move.
Second.
Second.
Motion second.
All right,
Discussion.
so the discussion on this one was, from a number of members, was that board appointments currently, as written, council, county executive nominates, council confirms, and then there was, well, what if the county executive just dismisses somebody, this board doesn't have any oversight, so amending all 3. So for Police Accountability Board, it would be Section 8, Paragraph D1, which is on page 8 for the ACC, Section 12, Paragraph F, which is on page 15. For the Trial Board, Section 10, Paragraph C on page 19. And for all 3, it would read, if the county executive decides that the removal of a member is necessary prior to the end of the member's term, comma, the county executive may immediately suspend the member until the county council confirms or denies termination with a simple majority vote, period. Upon suspension, comma, the county executive must immediately inform both the member and the county council, comma, in writing, comma, as to the reason for suspension and termination, comma, and the council has 30 days to confirm or deny the termination, period. If the county council does not act within 30 days, the termination becomes effective. This is contrary to every other board appointment works. The council asked for how that language would read. If it gets applied to all 3, that would give, if anybody was to be removed, they can be suspended by the county executive, but this board would have the oversight to terminate them.
Thank you. Any discussion? Josh?
I'll just say current,
Well,
Yeah.
correct.
yeah, current draft reads that it, of course, that the serves at the pleasure of the county executive. This would then basically say, we don't want a situation where it could be a political, somebody comes in as a new county executive and they don't like people because they're politically different from them. So it just cleans and just gets rid of all the members on the board. It'd be nice to then have some accountability. So this then puts it in front of us to be able to say, and this still allows, I think, still allows the county executive to suspend a member, which I think keeps the authority under the county executive, makes it that they get to keep that part. But then we at the legislative branch, would then confirm it within 30 days. And I think that makes sense. The only question in my mind would then be whether it goes to the administrative charging committee and the trial board, or just the police accountability board. And I don't know if I don't even know if council has any recommendations there. But that's my thoughts.
I think having it the same across all 3 boards makes it the easiest to apply the law.
Yeah, you said
Agree.
across all 3.
Yeah, it says that here. Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor of Amendment 6, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Amendment 6 passes. Thank you. Unanimously. Amendment 7, I entertain a motion to approve Amendment 7.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, thank you.
So in first part of the amendment, page 25, we get to adding some rights for law enforcement, which are basic rights that you don't have to testify against yourself. So looking at section 20, paragraph E, it currently reads, the law enforcement agency has the burden of proof beyond preponderance of the evidence. The charged officer need not call any witnesses, and just insert there, including themselves. That would be the first part. That way it's clear that they do not have to testify if it is not their desire to testify, and that their decision to not testify cannot be used against them. And then the governor, looking at paragraph C, would delete the first paragraph, the first sentence of the same section, paragraph C, and replace it with the new state law, the Senate Bill 763. So what is struck on the board would be replaced with at least 30 days before a trial board proceeding begins, comma, the police officer shall be, parentheses, Roman numeral I, provided a copy of the investigatory record, semicolon, Roman numeral 2, notified of the charges against the police officer, semicolon, in 3, Roman numeral, notified of the disciplinary action being recommended. So it's a two-part amendment. One state law, one is basic constitutional right of not forcing the officer to testify, not using that against him.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
You have highlighted on this paper, officers can strike trial board members for good just shown.
Correct.
Good cause shown. I'm sorry. Can't read here today. Is there option? Is there anywhere in here for alternate members to these boards?
So that is provided. So within the trial board, looking at section 19, subparagraph B, so the actual board, when it meets, will consist of actively retired or administrative judge or judge of the district court or circuit court appointed by the county executive, a civilian, and then a police officer. So if they try to strike the judge, we're going to be in a pretty difficult position, and we're going to have to work around that in some way, shape, or form. But as to the civilian, as you see in paragraph B, the second sentence reads, no more than 5 civilian appointees may be appointed by the Wicomico County Police Accountability Board to be eligible to serve as a voting member of the trial board. So that is sort of if the civilian who is assigned, so for an example, the officer who's charged, the civilian member, that person's spouse had been arrested by that officer in the past, and the officer made the motion to recuse that civilian because their spouse, we'd have 4 backups who sort of could be next man or woman up. And this is why putting it in the code is important, because these types of questions come up, and with the very broad state law, we can see that there are answers to these, so we know that our officers are protected when they go to that trial board.
If I could, a brief interruption, like council's blessing that we, on the agenda, we had as an open work session on the fiscal 23 budget session to have a discussion with Public Works. I'd like to let them go home. This is going to be a longer night than we thought. Is that okay with council members?
Yeah. Yes.
If they so choose, they certainly may. Mr. Whitelock, don't want to hold you here all night. This is going to go a lot longer than we thought. It's going to be up to you. Okay, thank you. Sorry, go ahead. So is everyone familiar and okay with what's been presented in Amendment 7?
We have to do C because that's state law, right?
We have to add C, that's state law. It's just a matter of adding the protection that the officer need not testify if they do not wish, and it may not be used against them. Basic fundamental right of the U.S. Constitution.
Yep.
All those in favor of Amendment 7 to Legislative Bill 2022-04, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried, amendment passes.
Going on, I apologize.
Yeah, entertain a motion to approve Amendment number 8.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion.
Looking at section 23, if allowed by state law, there was an attempt to give the municipalities their ability to form their entire, or take away the ability for them to form their own board. So just by inserting if allowed by state law before this, still allows this county's municipalities, I believe Fruitland wants to join, Delmar wants to join, speaking with the Salisbury City Attorney, they wish to join. Sharptown does not have a police force. Pittsville, and speaking with them, I believe they want to join. So just saying if it's allowed by state law, we're going to let you join.
As long as you pay for it.
As long as you pay for it, very important part.
Yeah. Any questions? All those in favor of Amendment 8, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Amendment 8 passes. Entertain a motion to approve Amendment 9.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Discussion.
We're back in section 15. This is something that was passed by the governor through Senate Bill 763. So it adds to paragraph D, within 15 days after administrative charging committee issues an administrative charge against a police officer, the chief of the law enforcement agency shall offer discipline to the police officer who has been administratively charged in accordance with the disciplinary matrix. I guess they're just putting a hard 15 days on that, not allowing it to go any farther. So that was enacted by the governor. That's what the Amendment 9 proposes adding to section 15, paragraph D.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried, amendment passes. Entertain a motion to approve Amendment 10.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Mr. Illuminati?
Adding to section 19 of the trial board, add a paragraph G. This was again passed by Senate Bill 763, signed by Governor Hogan on April 21st, 2022. Paragraph G, which is a new paragraph, would read, the actively serving or retired administrative law judge or the retired judge of the district court or circuit court shall, 1, be the chair of the trial board, 2, be responsible for ruling on all motions before the trial board, and 3, prepare the written decision of the trial board, including the findings, conclusions, and recommendations of the trial board.
Any questions? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Amendment 10 passes unanimously. Entertain a motion to approve Amendment 11.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Second, okay, thank you.
Adding to section 20, add a paragraph R, passed by Senate Bill 763, signed by Governor Hogan. Within 45 days after the final hearing by a trial board, the trial board shall issue a written decision reflecting the findings, conclusions, and recommendations of a majority of the trial board, period.
Any discussion? All those in favor of Amendment 11, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Amendment 11 passes. Entertain a motion to approve Amendment number 12. Second.
Second.
Discussion.
This would add a section 6 to the first paragraph, general provisions, and then renumber all of the sections thereafter. There was discussion by Councilwoman Ackley last time as to transparency and the need for transparency. So section 6 would read advertisements, period. The county executive shall advertise a vacancy on the police accountability board, an administrative charging committee, or trial board on the Wicomico County website, period. An application to serve on a board can be made through either the online portal or the county executive's office, period. Further, if there is more than one vacancy on more than one board, the county council, at the regular council meetings, shall notify the public of the vacancies until the vacancy is filled pursuant to the code, period. So just telling the public more and more, this is going to be on the website. You can apply on the website. You can apply through the county executive's office. And when there's more than one vacancy, this council, as part of its general announcements, will say, we have a vacancy. If you wish to apply this manner.
Any discussion? All those in favor of Amendment 12, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Amendment 12 is approved. Any other additions that the council would like to see to Legislative Bill 2022-04?
Mr. President?
Yes.
Just the conversation, I guess, on compensation. I don't know if we've gotten any amendments on that or any kind of thoughts on the compensation of this. We still, I guess, don't know as a group how much time this will be, what kind of a commitment this will look like. I think other counties are providing compensation. We're certainly not as big as Prince George's, Montgomery, and even Baltimore City. But is there some sort of stipend or something like that that would go towards individuals to encourage robust service?
That's gonna take another work session.
I thought I'd just bring it up. I don't have strong feelings, man.
Yeah, I brought it up once before too, but.
Yeah, I would probably suggest, I think it's a good point. I don't think we're necessarily, there's still so many unknowns until we get a better handle on this. That's probably for another day.
Any other comments?
We need to focus on moving this forward.
All those in favor of Legislative Bill number 2022-04 as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Legislative Bill number 2022-04 passes.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
May I be excused?
Yes, you may.
Go to dinner.